In this video, we're going to be providing the ultimate breakdown for Terence Crawford versus Israil Madrimov. Welcome to Boxing Science. This is a YouTube channel where we provide a detailed analysis around the training of champions past, present and future. And we also provide pre-fight breakdowns, including Fury versus Usyk, where we provided a detailed analysis using the traits and CompuBox data to make a prediction about how the fight is going to go. Now we move on to another massive fight between Terence Crawford and Israil Madrimov for the WBA Super Welterweight Championship of the World. This is going to go down on August 3rd on the massive Riyadh season card in Los Angeles, California, and it's a fantastic matchup of styles. We've got Terence Crawford, who's already a legend of boxing. He's a two-time undisputed champion of the world, and he's attempting to become a 4-weight world champion. But he's coming up against the dream, the Uzbekistan star, Israil Madrimov. He's got a unique boxing style. He's strong, he's fast, he's explosive, punches from all different angles. It's going to be a really tough task for Terence Crawford. And when a fight comes up like this, it really intrigues us to look at what are the keys to victory for both fighters, what are the trends, what are the tendencies, and looking at the data to make a prediction on how this fight is going to go. So this is what we're going to be providing in this video, along with another 2 breakdowns of fights that are on this card. This card is absolutely stacked of fantastic fights, world title fights, and heavyweight title clashes. And we love looking at the heavyweights. We're going to look at the former world champion, Andy Ruiz, who's taking on Big Baby Miller, and also one of the future heavyweight stars, Jared Anderson versus Martin Bakole. So let's start off with the main event. This is the science behind Terence Crawford versus Israil Madrimov. So we're going to start off this analysis by looking at the champion, Israil Madrimov. He's got an unbelievable style, fantastic lateral movement, fantastic footwork, and his punch power is unbelievable. He's stopped most of his opponents, and some of the knockdowns that he's had is just highlight reel after highlight reel knockdown and knockout. He likes looping shots over the top with the right hand and even the left hook. This one that he landed against Walker actually got scored as not a knockdown, but this was like an unbelievable shot. If this actually got scored as a knockout, it'd probably be knockout of the year. So Madrimov, really powerful and sets up his attacks from distance. But something that Madrimov does, and probably is underrated, is his body work. Whether that's a lead hand to the body, a looping backhand, or a left hook to the body. This could be a tactic to use against Crawford. He's got fantastic footwork, he's got a high guard. The body is the way to go. You've seen this in fights with Avanesian and Spence. Spence landed 37 body shots, Avanesian landed 24. Over 50% of Avanesian's success came to the body. So Madrimov, being a really effective body puncher, may look to do this with Crawford, especially when Crawford has been quite inactive over the last few years, and also is 36 years old now. With somebody with good feet, high guard, he's aging, he's got a fantastic engine, which we're going to be talking about in a little bit later. The one place that to try and slow him down and get some success is to land to the body. Also, Madrimov doesn't only hurt his opponents to the body, he also uses the body shots to set up his attacks to the head. He'll often look to feint, to go low, and then look to loop over the top. So when you've got Crawford with a high guard, the one place to kind of bring it down is to land some heavy body shots. And this looping right hand is something that Crawford been caught with and potentially been hurt with. Fights against Porter, Benavidez Jr., shots that has been landed on him by more orthodox fighters than Madrimov. The difference between them fighters and Madrimov is more unorthodox, faster feet, and also you don't know what punch he's going to throw. Kind of drops down, drives up, and that looping shot might be a really wide right hook, an overhand right, or maybe even a left hook. These the kind of leaping shots look very wild, but they're extremely effective, as you can see with the knockout reel highlights, but also when you look at his CompuBox data, so his fight against Kubranov where he won the world title, he landed 50% of his power punches, which is unbelievable. The reason why he's able to do this is because he gets a lot of lower body power. You've seen his footwork drills, posted it time and time on Instagram. We've just done a Boxing Science Reacts video as well. His footwork is immense. So he's able to work the angles, work his feet into range really quickly. But also, he has more of a bend in his knee, so he gets a lot of power from the lower limb. He achieves this with exercises such as the box jump, which he recently posted on social media. This is unbelievable power, 138 centimeters. Doing it from a standing position, this is way above the standard that we see boxers do. Madrimov, unbelievable power from his lower body to be able to get in range for these looping attacks. So that's how he achieves these attacks physically, but tactically, he looks to try and set this up by a really effective jab. In his last fight, Madrimov landed 43% of his jabs, and 50% of these was a jab to the body. Again, talking about his body work to start breaking down his opponents, but also this is a great rangefinder to set up them looping attacks. So this is a tactic that he might be going for with the Crawford fight. However, with Terence Crawford, we're saying about these fighters that have had success to the body, had success overcommitting with the right hand and the right hand over the top. Thing is, he's stopped all these opponents. He's going on an unbelievable knockout streak with 11 knockouts on the trot. And a lot of these knockdowns and knockouts have come from the opponent overcommitting. Errol Spence, Sean Porter, Kell Brook, Avanesian. They're all coming forward, all overcommitting. Crawford's in that southpaw stance and able to counterpunch with precision. So even though that Madrimov has had a lot of success with these wild but effective attacks and these leaping shots, it does leave him vulnerable to being counterpunched. If you look at how he commits compared to opponents like Terence Crawford has faced, Madrimov leaves himself in a much more vulnerable position to be able to be countered. Crawford's experience, his timing, and his knockout power, I can see that favouring Crawford as long as he's obviously not getting caught with these shots and he's being able to counterpunch with precision. This makes it a really, really interesting dynamic because we've got Madrimov with a leaping power shots, which is his strengths, feeding into Crawford's strengths at the same time. And what you notice about all these knockdowns that Crawford against these opponents when they're overcommitting, that he is in the southpaw stance. Crawford is a switch hitter, often in that southpaw stance, and I think that this is really key for this fight. Madrimov is going to be wanting to land his jab to be able to find that range, and by Crawford switching southpaw, this will help nullify that jab, but also makes it harder for Madrimov to be able to land them leaping shots, so he has to cover a lot more distance. Obviously, he's shown this that he's not scared of committing, but if you're in that southpaw stance, he's got to commit even further, so then Crawford will be able to anticipate that coming on. So let's now take a look at some of the punch stats that can give us an insight to how this fight might play out round by round, looking at the work rate and punch outputs by each fighter. Now, let's look at the starts of each fighter. Madrimov seems to be a pressure fighter that has a faster start, whereas Terence Crawford is known to be a little bit of a late starter. In his fights against Spence and Porter, the first round, he throws around 20 punches per round, and against Porter, he only landed 2 in that first round. So it takes that first round, 2 or 3 to start downloading that data. The thing is with Madrimov is that he has a relatively low output. Despite this fast start, landing these power punches, he only averaged in the Kubranov fight 33 punches per round. And there's very limited data around his punch outputs. But if you have a look at some of his fights, because he loads up and he's got a lot of lateral movement, a lot of good footwork, he's constantly bouncing, quite an inefficient style in terms of a fitness perspective. And you can see some of his fights, once they go past rounds 5, 6, 7, that he looks visibly tired. And you have a look at his actual knockouts. Most of these knockouts happen under 6 rounds. Once he goes past 6 rounds, he hasn't got a late stoppage to date. With this might be an indicator that he is unable to step up through them gears and maintain that pressure in the later rounds. On the other hand, Crawford has got an unbelievable engine, and this is shown with his 11 knockouts. 50% of them have come after round 8. So you can see that Crawford is able to step up through the gears. We talk about that slow start by Crawford, rounds 1 to 3. That is followed by rounds 4 to 7, a big step up in terms of his punch output, an increase in average punches thrown by 36%. This is what does the damage for the later round stoppages, because he's stepping up through the gears there, is landing on his opponent, is making his opponent work harder, and then in rounds 8, 9, 10, 11, the opponent has taken enough damage and Crawford's able to then break them down. Crawford stepping up rounds 4 to 7 against somebody that has a relatively low output, struggles with his fitness, will be really beneficial. This was really successful in the Sean Porter fight, but the rounds were really close. Crawford was standing off Porter a bit, and Porter was having a bit of success to the point where he found out in round 9 when Crawford sat in the corner, the famous clip that's gone through social media, where he finds out that he's actually down in the fight, and he comes out round 10 and really steps it up and ends up stopping Sean Porter. With this fight with Madrimov, can he risk being in that position? Because Madrimov is a bigger puncher and he's a stronger guy, and he potentially might be more durable than Sean Porter. Crawford can't find himself in a position being down on the cards going into round 10. So what I think that Crawford might do in terms of his punch output is very similar to the Avanesian fight. Now, if you look at his punch stats for the Avanesian fight, unbelievable punch outputs. He averages 103 punches per round. When I looked at the stats for this, I was like, right, I've got to go and watch the fight back. And the reason why the punch stats are so high is because he uses a very active lead hand. So he's in the southpaw stance, he's using the jab a lot. He throws 73 jabs per round. Over 70% of his punches was the jab, but he only landed around 4.5 average jabs per round. He's often missing with that jab or just pouring out his lead hand, but what this did was kept Avanesian at bay. Avanesian, even though he hasn't got the footwork or the punch power of Madrimov, very similar. Pressure fighter on the front foot, often with a high guard as well. Crawford decided to have that output quite high with that lead hand to offset any attacks and also to start fatiguing his opponent. And I think that this is how he's going to be approaching the Madrimov fight. It's quite risky because obviously Madrimov is strong. Will Terence Crawford have the strength and the fitness to be able to do this at higher weight? It suggests with his training methods at the moment that he does like really big weights on the deadlifts. Here he's lifting 445 pounds on the trap bar deadlift. He's lifting over 3 times his body weight on the rack RDL, and he seems to be doing more high intensity fitness work now. He's currently training at the UFC Performance Institute, working with top MMA S&C coach Gav Pratt, doing rowing intervals, also doing some outdoor sprint work as well. So he's been really stepping up his high intensity fitness. So I can see going into this fight that is potentially going to be very active with that lead hand to stop Madrimov setting up his attacks, but also get Madrimov working harder to evade the attacks, but also working harder to set up his own. So with this, what are the keys to victory? Madrimov needs to work to the body, needs to work early, but also needs to be quite efficient as well. You can't overwork against Crawford because Crawford has that fitness, has that experience to start dominating in the later rounds. Crawford, I think, needs to come out southpaw, start working that jab, similar to what he did with Avanesian. Look to really step on Madrimov in the later rounds. In terms of this, looking at the stats, looking at the trends, my fight prediction would be to go towards Crawford, especially looking at the stats and thinking about Crawford's experience. But I think that a really unique and really interesting clash of styles, that Madrimov might be Crawford's toughest test today. So normally on these pre-fight analysis, we only look at the main event, but because this card is jam-packed, it's only fair to have a look at some of the fights on the card. Let's have a look at the heavyweights, starting off with Andy Ruiz Jr. versus Jarrell Big Baby Miller. Interesting matchup this. A kind of indirect relationship with Jarrell Miller supposed to be fighting AJ on June 1st, 2019. Failed multiple drug tests and Andy Ruiz stepped in, beat AJ and become unified heavyweight world champion. Changed his life because he made millions and millions of dollars. Whereas Jarrell Miller went into the wilderness for a bit, got banned, then he's come back and they're both meeting again. What's interesting is that even though Miller had that drug ban, he's actually had double amount of fights that Andy Ruiz has since the AJ fight. Andy Ruiz has been really inactive. He's only fought twice since 2019. And I think that this is going to play a big factor into this fight. Big Baby Miller, 333 pounds he weighed in for his last fight, and he threw over 40 punches per round. Unbelievable stats. You see like some welterweights that don't throw that many punches. And the amount of pressure that he was applying to Dubois, looking at that first half of the fight, thinking Dubois was going to come unstuck, but Dubois' strength, speed, his power, and his resilience is what got him through that fight and ended up getting that late stoppage. Miller, he might drop down a little bit of weight after that fight. He might have thought, I did gas out towards the back end of the fight, so he might look to come in a little bit lighter, but I can't see him going anywhere lower than 300 pounds. And Andy Ruiz is a smaller heavyweight, comes in quite heavy, but has he got the strength to keep off a 300 pound heavyweight that's punching over 40 punches around and constantly applying that pressure? And with the Dubois fight, Dubois landed a career highest 208 punches. Miller took a lot of damage in that fight. That might show that Miller has an unbelievable chin that Ruiz might not be able to break, or that might have taken a lot of damage going into this fight. So it makes it really interesting. Andy Ruiz has been really inactive. His last fight was over 2 years ago now against Luis Ortiz. And in that fight, his punch output averaged just 23 punches per round. So almost half the punch output of Jarrell Miller. He won that fight against Ortiz. He got a good knockdown, but he looks visibly hurt at times. He looked quite passive at times as well, looking for that rest. Miller isn't going to give him that rest. And with the inactivity, with the size difference, I am favouring Miller in this fight, which is going to be an upset. I looked at a poll the other day that looked at Ruiz Jr. 89% people voted Ruiz Jr. to win this fight versus Big Baby Miller, 11%. But I just think that looking at the data, looking at the weights, looking at Ruiz's inactivity, I think that Miller's going to take this one. Interesting clash of styles. If Andy Ruiz turns back the clock and has got a performance in him like he did on that night, June 1st, 2019, he should win this fight. But if he comes out like he did against Ortiz 2 years ago, I think Big Baby Miller will apply too much pressure. He'll be too big, too strong. I think he'll get the win. So let's take a look at the other heavyweight clash on the card. Jared Anderson versus Martin Bakole. Now this is a really interesting matchup. I was really shocked to see Jared Anderson's team picked out Martin Bakole, because Martin Bakole is a problem for anybody. I've seen him in the flesh. 300 pounds, really awkward, really tough. And the sparring stories about him knocking out Dubois and Usyk and all these other fighters, he seems like the boogeyman of the division. But Jared Anderson is supposed to be the next superstar of America and world boxing. Really, he should be beating people like Bakole. But I think like it is very early for Jared Anderson. And also, Bakole poses a much different threat to what Jared Anderson has seen before. He's 300 pounds. Jared Anderson is 250 pounds. So there's 50 pounds of difference. But the main thing is what is Jared Anderson used to? Jared Anderson's average last 9 opponents weighed in at 235 pounds. Some of the fighters that is boxed have been under 220 pounds. Suddenly, he's got a big guy in front of him, 300 pounds. And somebody that is able to absorb punishment. His work against Carlos Takam, he was just literally just sitting against the ropes, taking some shots, riding some shots, and then just boom, countered and burst into action. Jared Anderson's last fight against Riyad Murray finished in a 10 round points decision. So he can go the distance. He averaged between 50 and 60 punches per round, which is really high for a heavyweight. However, his opponent, Murray, recorded a record low in terms of the amount of punches thrown in a 10-round contest. He only threw, on average, 14 punches per round and only landed 3.4 punches per round. Even though Anderson's punch output was quite high, he was coming up against somebody that was really, really negative, not looking to counter, not looking to really win the fight. And also Jared Anderson, 2 out of his last 3 fights, when he's stepping up in terms of competition, hasn't ended in knockout. And also his fight where he did get the stoppage against Rodchenko, that was no knockdown. It was literally stopping the guy on his feet. So has Jared Anderson got the power to meet 1, the bigger guys, and 2, higher competition? Biggest test to do that is against somebody who's 300 pounds, who is really tough and really awkward. So in this fight, I can see Jared Anderson having a lot of success very early on, Bukole taking his time, potentially absorbing and riding some shots on the ropes, being really stationary, but using his strength to his advantage, looking to rough up Anderson, making it quite close, similar to what he did against Carlos Takam, and landing them counterpunches, start breaking Anderson down. And I think it's going to be a really interesting fight if this goes past rounds 5 and 6, because Anderson will expend a lot of energy, but also Bukole might take a lot of damage, and also going into them later rounds being 300 pounds will be quite tough. Expect anything to happen after rounds 5 or 6, potentially a stoppage either for Anderson or stoppage for Bukole. But again, it's a really, really interesting fight. Okay guys, so that's the end of this pre-fight breakdown for the Terence Crawford versus Israil Madrimov fight, and also the heavyweight clashes that are on the card as well. I can't wait for this card. If you've got any thoughts about any of the fights that I've mentioned, any of the predictions that I've mentioned as well, also leave your prediction in the comment box below. How do you see the fights going down? Do you think that Crawford will be too much for Madrimov, or do you think Madrimov is going to cause the upset? What do you think to Andy Ruiz Jr.? His inactivity, can he rewind the clock and beat Big Baby Miller? And also Jared Anderson, is he the future star of the heavyweight division, or is Martin Bukole going to derail his journey? Let me know in the comment box below, and if you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button so don't miss out on any future content coming from Boxing Science. Thank you very much guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully see you on the next video of Boxing Science.